Picture the thick, humid air of a 4th of July weekend.
Oh, yeah, you can almost feel it.
Right. It's suburban Indianapolis. The year is 1997. And the neighborhood is buzzing with that quiet pre-holiday anticipation. You know, sprinklers are running. People are getting ready for cookout.
Just a classic Midwestern summer evening.
Exactly. And inside one of these homes, a 10-year-old girl named Gretchen looks up as her mother leans down to give her a goodbye kiss. And as she does, Gretchen feels the familiar, gentle tap of a pendant against her cheek. It's this necklace she and her older brother bought for her.
Right, the one that reads #1 Mom.
Yeah, that exact one. So her mother turns, walks out the door to her blue 1990 Mercury Sable, drives off into the summer evening, and, well, she essentially steps into thin air.
It's just chilling.
It really is.
Yeah.
Because on paper, what happens next in these investigative case files looks like a really familiar, tragic pattern. You know, a woman asks for a divorce, she vanishes, and the husband is left acting incredibly suspicious.
All right, it's the oldest true crime trope in the book. But our mission today as we go through these reports isn't just to retell a story about a suspicious spouse.
No, we want to go deeper.
Exactly. We're going to look at the mechanics of an investigative failure. We're going to dissect how a bungled, delayed police response doesn't just, stall a case. It actively creates this permanent web of reasonable doubt.
A web that honestly still traps an entire family decades later, leaving them without answers and, frankly, without justice.
Right. It's a total systemic failure.
So let's welcome everyone joining us on this deep dive. To understand how she vanished, we really first have to understand the reality she was trying to escape.
Yeah, you have to look at the context.
Let's look at where Bonnie Lee Schultz was in her life. She had been married to her high school boyfriend, Rick, for 26 years.
That is a long time.
It is. They were raising 2 kids, Josh, who was 15 at the time, and Gretchen, who was 10. They were living on a pretty tight budget, and Bonnie was just deeply entrenched in the role of a traditional homemaker.
Right, for over 2 decades, that was the status quo. That was her entire world.
And then something shifts.
Yeah, you hit the catalyst. In 1995, Bonnie's mother was diagnosed with cancer and went through this very rapid, just devastating decline.
Oh, man, that's so hard.
It is. And when you look at the psychology of witnessing that kind of sudden loss, especially a parent, it acts as this massive accelerator for self-reflection.
Like a wake-up call.
Exactly. You realize in a very visceral, unavoidable way that life is just painfully short. So whatever dissatisfaction was quietly bubbling under the surface of Bonnie's marriage, it suddenly couldn't be ignored anymore.
I think we hear this narrative a lot, right? The quote-unquote sudden divorce, like someone just wakes up on Tuesday and decides to walk out.
Right, but it's never actually sudden.
No, looking at these files, it's more like a structural failure. It's like a bridge that looks totally fine to the commuters driving over it every day, but the rebar inside has been rusting away for 10 years.
That is a perfect way to look at it. The outward collapse is just the final stage of a long internal decay. Yeah. And you actually see the first public crack in that structure on Easter in 1997.
Right, the Wisconsin trip.
Yeah, they were on a family trip to Wisconsin for a niece's communion. And in front of her siblings, Bonnie and Rick get into this heated, incredibly awkward fight.
Yikes. In front of the whole family.
Yeah. Bonnie starts pointing out all the things that other husbands do for their wives that Rick simply doesn't do for her. She is vocalizing this severe lack of intimacy and a feeling of just being completely unappreciated.
And that vocalization actually leads to action, which is huge. Bonnie goes out and she gets a job. She starts doing inventory audits for a company called RG's.
Which is a very specific type of environment.
It is. For those who don't know, this kind of work involves going into retail stores, usually after hours, and physically counting the stock.
Right, late nights.
Yeah, late nights, scanning barcodes under those terrible fluorescent lights. It's tedious work, but the environment is basically an incubator for bonding.
Oh, absolutely.
You are working these strange hours with the same small group of people talking constantly just to stay awake. And for Bonnie, it was this taste of independence. She was building an identity completely outside of her home for the first time in 26 years.
She was finding an outlet. I mean, the isolation she felt at home was suddenly contrasted with this environment where people actually saw her and engaged with her.
Right.
The contrast just made the emptiness of her marriage undeniable. And we see this culminate during a really tense 9 o'clock walk Bonnie takes with her close friend, Diane Dando.
Right. This is just a couple of weeks before she disappears. This is the bombshell walk. Bonnie tells Diane she is terrified of Rick's reaction, but she is absolutely resolute. She wants a divorce.
He's totally done.
She is. She's already looking for apartments. And then she admits something even more dangerous. She says she is on the verge of having an affair. She tells Diane she is just starving to feel loved and appreciated.
And enter John Guy.
Ah, right. The coworker.
Yeah, coworker at RGS. He starts providing all the attention she has been craving for years. Bonnie's getting bolder, you know. She is finally choosing herself after 26 years of putting her own needs last.
Yeah.
And that psychological shift really sets the stage for the night of July 3rd, 1997.
Let's walk through the timeline of that night, because the sequence of events is just critical to understanding what went wrong later.
It really is.
It starts with the confrontation on the front porch of their home. 10-year-old Gretchen is inside, watching them through the window, and for 20 intense minutes, her parents argue.
Which must have been terrifying for a kid.
Absolutely. Bonnie gives Rick a firm ultimatum. She tells him she wants a divorce, and Rick flat out refuses. He just says no.
Which, psychologically speaking, is a desperate attempt to maintain control over a situation that is rapidly slipping out of his grasp.
Right. But Bonnie doesn't back down this time. She leaves the house to meet a coworker, Anita, at a Houlihan's restaurant.
And when she gets to Houlihan's, that brave face she had on the porch completely drops.
Yeah, she just crumbles.
Bonnie is crying, visibly shaking.
Yeah.
She is in such a state of distress that Anita actually stops and asks her, point blank, if Rick hit her.
And Bonnie says no, but then she adds this terrifying caveat. She says she doesn't know what Rick might do.
That statement is a massive red flag.
Right.
It shows a genuine, deep-seated fear of her husband's potential for violence, even if, he hadn't been physically abusive before. From there, the night kind of fractures into a secret timeline.
Yeah, let's track that.
So after dinner, they go to a house party for fireworks. And then around 12:30 in the morning, a small group moves to a local bar called the Timeout Lounge.
And this is where we see how well-intentioned secrets can completely derail a future investigation.
Precisely.
Because Anita leaves the bar around 2, maybe 2:30 in the morning. But Bonnie stays behind. And she isn't just sitting alone at a booth. She is out in the parking lot with John Guy.
Right, the coworker she was falling for.
Exactly. They stay out there talking and kissing in the shadows until 4:45 in the morning. At 4:45, they finally get into their separate cars and drive off, both taking 62nd Street heading west.
Mm-hmm.
They wave goodbye to each other at the Compton Street intersection, and that wave, that is the last confirmed sighting of Bonnie Lee Schultz.
Which just brings this jarring contrast when the sun comes up a few hours later. It's the morning of July 4th. Gretchen comes downstairs expecting, the usual holiday morning routine.
Pancakes, excitement, all of that.
Exactly. But instead, she finds her dad fully dressed. Not in pajamas, but in street clothes. He's sitting in the living room, calmly reading with the dog in his lap.
So weird.
And when she asks where her mom is, he just casually mentions she's probably at a friend's house.
But the hours keep ticking by, and Bonnie had promised she was going to take Gretchen to the movies that day.
Which she wouldn't just miss.
Right, she doesn't show up. Finally, at 5:10 in the evening, Rick reports her missing. A deputy from the Marion County Sheriff's Department comes to the house. And this moment right here is where the entire trajectory of justice just gets completely derailed.
Yeah, this is the fatal flaw.
Yeah.
The deputy takes down the vehicle information. But the moment he hears that Rick and Bonnie were having marital issues, this massive cognitive bias kicks in.
The classic runaway wife theory.
Yes. He assumes she just needs to cool off after a fight. So he tells Rick to call them if she turns up, and he literally just leaves. The missing persons report is essentially shelved.
Unbelievable.
It enters this weekend hold, meaning absolutely no investigative resources will be deployed until regular business hours on Monday.
I mean, treating a missing persons case as a runaway spouse for the first 48 hours, it's like watching a house catch fire and deciding to wait and see if it rains before calling the fire department.
That's a great analogy.
By the time Monday morning rolls around, the forensic house has already burned to the ground.
That is precisely the mechanical failure of this investigation. Think about what gets lost in those first 72 hours. Security tapes from local businesses overwrite themselves.
Right, this is 1997. It's all VHS.
Exactly. Tire tracks or signs of a struggle wash away. Cell data, if they had even thought to pull it, immediately grows cold. The memories of potential witnesses at the Timeout Lounge fade, Or they get confused by the holiday weekend,
The physical reality of the crime scene just degrades every single hour.
leaving only circumstantial evidence in the ashes.
And we need to talk about that circumstantial evidence, because Rick's behavior that weekend is setting off major alarm bells for everyone around him.
Oh, yeah.
Think about how you would react if your spouse just didn't come home. You are tearing the house apart, you are calling every hospital in the state, you are panicking. Rick didn't do any of that.
He doesn't even call Bonnie's best friend, Diane, until Sunday night at 7 o'clock.
Bonnie has been missing since Thursday night.
Right. And when Diane answers the phone and hears his shaky voice say Bonnie is missing, her immediate instinctual thought is, you killed her.
Because it's just so unnatural. He goes over to Diane's house, sits in a chair, stares at his feet, and says two of the most chilling, bizarre things in this entire file.
Yeah, these quotes are wild.
First, he says it's going to be days before anyone finds her car, quote, somewhere like behind a doctor's office.
Why would you be that specific?
Exactly. And then, completely unprompted, he mutters that Bonnie is too stupid to even know how to use an ATM card. His wife is missing, and he is sitting there insulting her intelligence to her best friend.
It is incredibly suspicious behavior. But, and this is the crucial part, this is the danger of a delayed investigation. Because the police squandered that window for hard forensic proof, they and the family are forced to rely on dissecting bizarre behavior.
Right.
Making an odd comment about an ATM card makes you an emotionally cold, highly suspicious person. It does not prove you committed a murder in a court of law.
Which is exactly what we see play out when the investigation finally truly starts. It is August 6th. A full month has passed since Bonnie vanished, before police conduct an official, recorded interview with Rick.
A month.
A whole month. How do you even establish a reliable timeline 30 days later?
Well, you often can't. Which is why investigators look for discrepancies in the suspect's own narrative. And in this interview, Rick makes what detectives consider a massive unforced error.
Oh, the slip-up with Anita.
Right. Remember Anita, the coworker from Hula Hands? Well, to protect Bonnie's secret affair, Anita had lied to Rick when he called her that weekend.
She was covering for her friend.
Exactly. She told him she and Bonnie left the bar at 3 in the morning, and she explicitly withheld what route they took or where they were going.
But in the police interview, Rick openly admits that on Saturday night, he drove down 62nd Street through Broad Ripple looking for her.
The exact route John Guy watched Bonnie take at 4:45 in the morning.
So, wait, if Anita never told him where they were, and he intentionally didn't check the major highways like Interstate 465, how does he magically guess her exact route home? Was he following her that night?
The police immediately hone in on that theory.
Huh?
And it is bolstered by this really creepy detail John Guy shares with them. John tells detectives he had this eerie, unshakable gut feeling that they were being watched from the shadows of the Time Out Lounge parking lot that night.
Just staring at them from the dark.
Yeah. So to test the waters, police administer polygraph tests. John Guy passes his. Rick fails.
Which, naturally, throws gasoline on the investigative fire. But because they still have no physical evidence, no car, no crime scene, they have to get creative with their tactics.
They do.
They deploy a strategy often referred to in law enforcement circles as the shady boots maneuver.
And I've always found this tactic fascinating. The mechanics of it are simple but really aggressive. In Indiana, law enforcement can legally interview minors without parental consent. However, parents will usually block access if they are present, so the police wait for the suspect, in this case Rick, to leave the house. Once he is gone, they swoop in to interview the children, Josh and Gretchen, alone.
Wow.
The tactical goal is to bypass the parents' barrier and prevent any coaching or intimidation before the kids can speak to detectives.
Which is wild because Rick had explicitly told the police he wanted to be present for any interview with 10-year-old Gretchen. They deliberately bypassed that.
They did.
And during this solo interview, it yields a massive piece of physical evidence. Gretchen goes upstairs to the master bedroom and brings down the #1 mom necklace.
The exact necklace Bonnie was wearing when she kissed Gretchen goodbye.
Yes. Gretchen tells the detective she found it sitting in an unusual spot in the bedroom, not where her mom usually kept her jewelry.
Which just raises a terrifying sequence of questions.
Right. Like, did Bonnie actually make it back to the house that night? Did a confrontation happen in that bedroom?
The police take the necklace as evidence, obviously. And eventually, Rick demands it back. Detective Kelly agrees to meet Rick in a public place to return it. And the exchange is straight out of a paranoid thriller.
Seriously.
As Kelly hands the necklace over, Rick looks at him and allegedly asks, "Are you wearing a wire?"
Who says that?
Right, and then he mutters, You will never figure this out.
It's just a damning, taunting statement. And when the family hears about this, it completely fractures their perspective. Suddenly, memories from that first weekend take on a much darker context.
Oh, everything gets re-examined.
Yeah. Bonnie's sister Sue recalls that when she arrived to help search, Rick was wearing a different pair of glasses. When she asked about it, Rick casually mentioned his normal ones had broken.
Convenient timing.
Very. Sue also remembers seeing a distinct scratch on the side of his face, right next to his eye.
But here is the ultimate tragedy of this case file. That crucial memory from Sister Sue. It is entirely unverified.
Ugh, because of the delay.
Exactly. The police never took photographs of Rick in those early days. They never documented his face or collected the broken glasses. Why? Because the deputy on day one assumed he was dealing with a runaway wife, not a potential homicide. They didn't treat the husband or the house like a crime scene until the physical evidence was long, long gone.
Which brings us to the collateral damage of this failure. The people left to carry the weight of those mistakes. Let's look at Bonnie's son, Josh. He was 15 when his mother vanished. He is a grown man now, and he has stated publicly that he is willing to accept the horrific possibility that his father murdered his mother. He just wants the truth.
But his anger isn't just directed at his father, is it?
No, it is heavily directed at the police.
Absolutely. Because the police built this elaborate, highly suggestive theory pointing entirely at Rick. But they failed to secure a single piece of hard evidence to back it up. No crime scene, no blood, no car, no definitive timeline. They pointed the finger at the only parent those kids had left, placing a permanent cloud of suspicion over their entire lives without doing the foundational forensic work to prove it in a courtroom.
They forced a family to live in perpetual limbo.
It is maddening. You read these files and you realize just how incredibly fragile justice is. If the right steps aren't taken in those first critical hours, the truth basically evaporates. So as you, the listener, process all of this, what is the core takeaway?
That's the big question.
The core takeaway is understanding the destructive power of investigative anchoring bias. When that deputy anchored to the runaway wife theory, he didn't just delay a search party, he actively destroyed the integrity of the investigation.
Because you can't go back in time.
No, you can't. We have to learn to separate circumstantial weirdness from forensic reality. Being a sore loser, being emotionally detached, making incredibly odd, specific comments about doctors' offices that makes you a highly suspicious individual, makes you a terrible partner. But in the eyes of the law, it does not prove you are a murderer.
But the police were so convinced of his guilt. I mean, the failed polygraph, the secret route, the missing glasses, it all points to him.
They were convinced. They really were. But let me offer an alternate perspective for you to consider as we wrap up this analysis.
All right, I'm ready.
We've spent this entire time dissecting the husband's bizarre behavior, assuming his guilt based on circumstantial red flags. But what if Rick is actually innocent?
I mean, that feels almost impossible to reconcile with everything he said and did.
I know, but consider the mechanics of the timeline. What if the police's immediate tunnel vision on the evil husband narrative, combined with that massive 72-hour delay in actually starting the investigation, provided the perfect cover for someone else entirely?
Wait, are you talking about the person John Guy felt watching them?
Exactly. What if the presence lurking in the shadows of the Timeout Lounge parking lot wasn't a jealous husband? What if it was a completely random predator? Someone who watched a vulnerable, crying woman get into her car alone at 4:45 in the morning. By writing Bonnie off as a runaway and focusing all their delayed energy entirely on the husband, the police may have handed a stranger the perfect crime.
They gave him a head start.
A huge head start. They allowed a random predator to simply walk away, completely undetected, because everyone was too busy analyzing Rick's strange comments.
That is a deeply unsettling thought. The idea that a lack of action didn't just fail Bonnie and trap her family in limbo, but it might have actively protected the real killer.
It's a very real possibility.
It all circles back to that humid July night. A 10-year-old girl, the gentle tap of a #1 mom necklace, and a woman stepping out the door into the dark, leaving us with a mystery that, because of the very people meant to solve it, might never find an answer.
Sadly, yeah.
Thank you for joining us as we explored the source files on this case. Stay curious, keep questioning the surface story, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.